All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to take two of tonight's live hangout for AP European history. All right, primary focus on the early parts, Renaissance, Reformation, Age of Exploration, and all of that good stuff. All right. So as far as that is concerned, we are here, and I am here with my friend Paul Sargent. And let me just bring a few things to your attention now that we're here. If you're watching on YouTube, you might not see some of the things that are available at tomritchey.net/hangouts. Okay. Now, first of all, there is the multiple choice strategy session that is happening tomorrow night. Okay. Happening tomorrow night. And that's going to be at 8 o'clock. That is a $10 admission ticket. But this is going to be stuff that I'm going really detailed into, as far as I'm going to be modeling how to tackle particular synthesis-based questions. Okay, so if you feel like you're struggling with the stimulus-based questions, then let's make sure that you sign up for that. If you're watching with your friends, you can watch this with a group of people. Also, if you're a teacher and you purchase it, you can share the archive with your class. I'm using some software that actually has only a limited number of people can be at the live session, but you can watch it as a group. And afterwards, I will share the archive with everybody who purchases the ticket. And if you're a teacher, you can share it with your students. If you're a student, you can share it with classmates. Also, another thing here is that some people don't know that I have an app. All right. So Romulus AP European History Review, otherwise known as Romulus Euro. We just decreased the price. This is now a $2.99 app. Now there's Euro Lite, which is free. That's got a limited number of questions. And then, of course, we've got Romulus Euro, which is the app for $2.99. And it's available both at the App Store and at Google Play. $2.99, and it's just a little $2.99 trivia app, just a nice way to get the content in front of you in a very convenient way. Turn your phone into an ally rather than an enemy in the studying process. So that's something to keep in mind as we look through here. And of course, I'm going to be broadcasting again on Thursday night and Friday morning, and I believe my friend Paul Sargent will be joining me for some of that stuff as well. So speaking of Paul, let me go ahead and turn it over to Paul. Let him introduce himself here.
All right. Hi, I'm Paul Sargent, and like Tom, I teach AP European history, and we're getting ready for the big test on Friday. So hopefully you guys have been studying up, you're getting ready and everything. I have a number of videos on my YouTube channel that will help you. There's a bunch of videos on Tom's channel, which will help you. And hopefully between them, we can get you guys up and ready for this exam, as ready as you can be. And these hangouts will help. And so get the questions flying, and let's know let us see what you need to know, and try and help you as much as we can.
All right, and ladies and gentlemen, let me just show you real quick Paul Sargent's YouTube channel, which is, of course, his name. If you type in Paul Sargent, you'll see Paul Sargent, AP Euro. There's Paul Sargent in Amsterdam, my favorite city, and over on his European tour. All right, so as far as that goes, I'm going to go to Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I don't typically use the chat because a bunch of people go in there and they say all kinds of like crazy and stupid and racist stuff and all of that kind of stuff. So as far as that goes, that's what we're looking at there. All right, so let me go ahead and look at Twitter at Tom Ritchie, and let's see what we've got here. Brittany says that somebody asked a good question. All right, and so for synthesis, can I do outside of Europe? Or, okay, so Tom D. Now, Tom D is not following me. Normally, I would not even answer that question. But Brittany, okay, since you are, and you said that that's a good question, I'm going to go ahead and answer it. For synthesis, can I do outside of Europe or before 1450? Paul, let's go ahead and talk about synthesis. There's some confusion about, does it have to be within the scope of the AP Euro course?
Well, I'm not sure of the exact answer. I don't know if there is an exact answer to this. I think what the readers are looking for is they're looking for you to be able to take this to something else. Now it doesn't have to be in this course even. It doesn't have to be history related. It can be something that you got out of a biology class, a science class, I mean, it can be something from, you know, all kinds of different different areas. And certainly I think that if you brought something from outside of the time period that the class involves, I think that would work. I think the tweet mentioned synthesizing with the Great Schism. And I think if you went back to that, I think that would be a perfectly valid thing. It really shows the readers that you know what you're talking about, not just about the prompt, but also about things which are, you know, a larger view of history. And I think really, and Tom, maybe you can clarify this, I think the synthesis point is there to just see that you can connect this to something which is unrelated. And if you can do that, then I think you've pretty much fulfilled the requirement. Is that a fair statement, Tom?
Yes, I would say so. Now, as far as this is concerned, when we're looking at synthesis, it really can be anything. And as far as I've seen ancient Egypt synthesis. Now, one of the things here, there is, you know, you've got, you know, outside of the time period, but it can be outside of the AP Euro course. And so, you know, I've seen ancient Egypt as synthesis. Now, another one is the across the pond synthesis. So if there are any of you who are taking AP European history after having already taken AP US history, then if you say, meanwhile, in the United States, this is what's going on, you employ a horizontal synthesis. Horizontal, I mean, same time, different place. Okay, so the United States, any of your US history, or if you took AP World History, or if you've had any kind of somewhat rigorous world history or US history course, you can use that for your synthesis. And like Paul was saying, synthesis is about basically taking the essay that is within the time and place and to get it out of there. So either same time, different place, different time, or different place, different time. All right, so synthesis just has to bring it outside. Now, Paul also mentioned that there are other forms of synthesis as well, that you can employ different academic disciplines and all of that. Now, I typically tell people 90% of the synthesis that we see and get points and all that at the reading is synthesis of the historical type, okay? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the argument and say that this argument that I'm making, now remember, synthesis isn't just a comparison of two things. That synthesis saying this argument that I'm making right here for this time and place, it's actually bigger than that, okay? So I'm extending the argument beyond that time and place. And as far as that goes, you know, I'm showing that I can go out there. Now, most of the time historical, but if you've got, you know, anthropology or stuff like that, but I find that usually the historical stuff works really well. And if it's not a post-World War II type prompt, one of the easiest ways to do synthesis is what I call PS synthesis, all right? PS synthesis, which is like you think with a letter. I'm done writing the letter, and then, you know what, I forgot, I'm going to keep writing. And so PS synthesis is about, you know, like I'm going to extend the argument into the next period, okay? So I'm just going to kind of keep going, kind of like, you know, Paul coaches track, and so a runner who is supposed to run through the finish line, like Paul, I don't think you train people to run to the finish line and just stop, right?
No, it's usually a bad tactic right there.
Okay, so the thing is, for Paul, you know, it's like he tells runners run through the finish line and just basically extend your argument in the next period. So the PS synthesis, I think, is you know, is a very good tactic. And if it's post World War II, you can always say prescript or whatever. Pre. All right. So yes, Brittany got him in and all that kind of stuff. Oh, what's that, Paul?
I just want to add one thing, because I think a common mistake that students make with synthesis is to tack on some vague statement about, and this has brought us to where we are today. And I don't think you're going to get points if it's something completely vague like that. You might not be wrong in sort of like the general sense, but it doesn't show a real understanding of what you're talking about if you simply say that brings us to where we are today, and even if you tack on in Europe.
And there's got to be something there that somebody can sink their teeth into. Like, for example, contextualization needs to have some type of details. You know, I tell people, like, you know, when you look at the opening crawl for Star Wars, it's giving you a big picture, but it's also giving you some specifics. And so contextualization needs to offer, even though it's given the big picture, it needs to offer some specifics. Synthesis needs to have something like some meat on the bone, something I can sink my teeth into. So it needs to mention a detail, kind of like, think about it as if you were doing a short answer question, because the short answers require a detail. So synthesis, like Paul said, is incomplete unless it gives a detailed example of something. So for example, like if I had a question about, there was an FRQ with the old exam about Martin Luther and Henry VIII. Well, if the student were to talk about John Calvin, then that would be synthesis, because the prompt was Martin Luther in Germany, Henry VIII in England. And so then you bring in John Calvin into the conversation. And so you're extending the argument geographically somewhere else to show that, okay, this is another facet of what's going on here. And that is, supporting your thesis. And so Ryan, I tell you what, this guy spend too much time in the percussion closet. As far as that goes, can you help explain the French Revolution as a whole? Now, Ryan, yeah, okay, I don't think we're going to be able to do that in just a short thing like this. Now, I've got lots of French Revolution videos. Paul's also, I think, got some stuff on the French Revolution, and we're probably going to leave you with that unless you have a specific question about the French Revolution. Now, a couple things you could say that, you've got nationalism, representative government, and stuff like that, and the fall of the absolute monarchy. But it would really not do it justice to just try to do like the whole thing right now. Remember the four phases: the liberal phase, the radical phase, the directory phase, and the Napoleonic phase. Now, of course, in the Napoleonic phase, Napoleon's consulate and Napoleon's empire. Now, Paul, you might need to report this guy to Twitter. That this fella, now he called his Twitter account Paul Sargent at I love Paul Sarge. Now maybe you just want to let that slide, okay? But you could get him for impersonation. But now here's the thing: since this person looks like they made a Twitter account, they followed you and me and named it after you, Paul. So what was Zwingli versus Calvin versus Luther? So if you give us a quick rundown on Luther, Zwingli, and Calvin.
All right. Well, I tell you what, I'm gonna narrow it down just to Luther and Calvin. The new curriculum in AP Euro does not require, or even doesn't really give an example of Zwingli. So let's leave him out of the conversation just to simplify things for our purposes. So if we're talking about Luther and Calvin, really you've got the sort of the two big ideologues of the Protestant Reformation. Luther's big thing, when you think about him, has to do with the idea that salvation, in other words, getting into heaven, is earned by faith alone. This is a big break from the Catholic Church at the time, who taught that salvation was earned both by faith and by doing good works, abiding by the sacraments, going to Mass on a regular basis, tithing to the church, those sorts of things. And Luther came out and said, no, according to his reading of the scriptures, that actually faith alone was the thing that gave salvation. He also preached what's called the priesthood of all believers. In other words, you don't have to be a priest that's ordained by the church in order to be able to preach the gospel. You just need to be able to read it and maybe even his German version of it, and then you could preach it to the people. When you get to Calvin in Geneva, then you've got, you really associate him with the idea of predestination. And predestination is a concept that I think people maybe oversimplify. And the logic behind it is this: if God is an all-knowing, all-powerful being who created everything, then being all-knowing, he knows the past, he knows the present, and he knows the future. And if he knows the future, that means that the future is already kind of preordained. He knows who's going to be saved. He knows who's not going to be saved. And there's not a lot that we can do about it, which confuses some people, because you think, hey, if you can't do anything about it, then why not just go live your life and do lots of bad things because, you know, it's not going to change your ways anyway. Calvin's response would be, your doing bad things would prove that you're not preordained to be saved, and God knew you were going to make that decision, and that's kind of the way it worked out. So predestination kind of abides by the fact that, and this is where the logic kind of comes in, is that those people who are predestined to go to heaven will behave as if they're predestined to go to heaven, which will show others around them that they're predestined to go to heaven. And then at some point, they're going to have like this conversion event, which is the moment where it's revealed to them that they're going to go to heaven. So, yeah, so those are the two things. Now, Calvinism spreads a whole lot more. Lutheranism kind of holds to the north of Germany and a few of the neighboring areas. But Calvin kind of sweeps across areas. The confusing thing about Calvinism is that Lutherans stay Lutheran no matter where they go. Calvinists tend to change their names because they adopt Calvinist ideals to their own areas. So in Scotland, they're Presbyterians. In England, I wore this because they're a big player on the in the course here. They're Puritans, and you know, when you get into France, they're Huguenots. So they go by lots of different names, but they're all Calvinists. That was a really, really long response. Sorry, Tom.
Not a problem, not a problem. The more you respond, the less I've got to tax my voice, which is getting its share of taxation. You know, so hopefully representation. Then again, 8 push is over, is it not? Now, Neil, talk about imperialism, which I'm guessing now, of course, there is the new imperialism. I'm going to just presume that you're talking about the what we call the old imperialism during the age of exploration. You know, now I will show you something here that I've created. You know, so I've created, and I want to finish, I want to make a series of these later on, but these are called need to know handouts, and I'm trying to mess with that. Now, one thing I will say about Zwingli is the only time I've ever mentioned Zwingli, you know, like Paul said, there's a lot of extraneous stuff. You know, you can talk about the battle he died in and all that. He and Luther had a disagreement over the Eucharist, you know, because the Catholic Church says that it is, you know, the Catholic Church says this is the body of Christ. You know, Jesus said, this is my body. All right, he's not speaking in code here or whatever. Okay, you know, do you understand English or, you know, Greek or Latin or Aramaic or whatever you're speaking? But the thing is that he said, this is my body. And Luther says, well, maybe it's not physical. Maybe there's some kind of spiritual presence there. And then Zwingli is like, nope, just a memorial. Any of you who are Baptist, where it just says in remembrance of me. That's all it is. Okay. It's just, it's a metaphor. It's in remembrance, and that's it. Which, you know, what you can illustrate with that is that the Reformation was not monolithic. All right. That the Reformation has all kinds of different facets to it. You know, whether you're talking about Henry VIII's conservative Reformation, which was basically secession. And then you've got Luther, who's got kind of a moderate view. Like, these are the things I don't like, the 95 Theses. By the way, I just unleashed a fresh meme, ladies and gentlemen. I've been sitting on this meme all day. So look at my Twitter, just unleashed a meme. Get that retweeted if you like it. Okay. So just so excited. I hope AP Euro Memes is tweeting. If y'all have got memes for me, don't just ask questions. Please, ladies and gentlemen, send memes. All right. So I've got this need to know handout, Age of Exploration Discovery, talking about kind of like what, when, where, who, knowing that exotic goods were expensive. 1453. That's one of those need to know years there, the fall of Constantinople. A turning point, because now the land route that had been dominated by the Byzantines, now dominated by the Ottomans. The Mediterranean trade dominated by the Italians. So Western Europeans are having to pay a lot of extra money, a lot of markup. So Spain and Portugal want to know, how do we get around the middleman? 3 G's, God, glory, and gold, not necessarily in that order. And take a look at some of those technological innovations. The Columbian Exchange, more available goods and cheaper. A concurrent movement, okay, so which is the new monarchies. That's happened about the same time. I tell you what, you know who has a video on the new monarchies? Watch this. Whoa, yeah, well, there he is, but you know, if you want to learn about they're looking for me. I don't have a video on that yet, but my friend Paul Sargent has a video on the new monarchies. Take a look at that. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we got that age of exploration. I'm about to tweet this. There's also something here that you can fill it out yourself, and you can see what how much you know and all of that good stuff. All right. So Neil, thank you for your question. And if you want to know about the new imperialism, we'll deal with that either Thursday night or Friday morning. Now, Paul, me, myself, Nikki, who just retweeted. Whoa, the meme retweet. Gosh, my meme has been retweeted 34 times already. Thank y'all so much. Tetzel, welcome to your tape. All right. So anyway, I just thought that was 95 reasons why you should be watching this hangout, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So as far as that goes, Nikki, who is retweeting memes, who is following, who is just a great person. Can you explain gender roles during the Renaissance and Reformation? What changed? What didn't change? Paul.
Well, I think the big thing that you have to understand is that when you look at gender roles, I like to say that there is a somewhat jagged progression throughout the course in terms of women's roles. It kind of moves upwards throughout the course, but in fits and starts with some backwards movements and all of that. But if you think of it as a continuous progression, I think that that's a pretty good way to look at it. Gender roles kind of varied during the Renaissance. If you're living on your family farm, you're doing like subsistence agriculture. You're growing the crops that you're going to eat. You got a few extra crops that you pay to the landowner for the use of the land. You're living sort of the old medieval lifestyle, throwing it back to the day before the Renaissance when, just life was simpler and, there were crusades. I mean, who wouldn't love it? But anyway, so you're back there, you're living on your family farm. Well, there's not really a gender role to living on the farm. I mean, obviously, the man and the woman have things that they have to do in the family, but otherwise, like the family works as a unit. And so there isn't really like distinct gender roles. As you get up into the cities in like Renaissance Italy and other places, then you start to see a bit more gender roles, especially in the upper class, where the men are going to train to fight and the women are going to be married off as wives. As you get into the Reformation, really, there's in some areas a step forward for women, in that some of the new Reformation religions allow for female priests or female preachers, I guess, not priests, that would be the Catholic Church, female preachers. But there's also a step back because in the areas that go Protestant, all of the convents are shut down, which takes away a huge opportunity for women who don't have another opportunity, whether they aren't married or whether they don't plan on getting married, or if they're like the fifth daughter of the wealthy family, they tend to get sent off to the convents pretty quickly. But those opportunities are gone, leaving them with really no other thing. So So like I said, it's a gradual upward movement, but it's in fits and starts. So, the Reformation and Renaissance are kind of an example of that.
All right. Excellent. One thing that I tell people, like, just if you want it in one sentence, the Renaissance was sexist. All right. That basically you don't have any kind of like advancement for women during that time. Now, remember also Castiglione, who wrote the Book of the Courtier. Basically this was an etiquette book, and he's writing about, here is how a gentleman should behave in court. And also there are things about how a lady should behave. And really what I love about Castiglione is like that he's actually got things when my students read him, it's like, actually, these things are pretty good. He's saying that like, the woman shouldn't, gossip or whatever. Now I know that's like one of those things that's probably just, falling on deaf ears. But at the same time, like basically Castiglione is showing a man and a woman how to behave attractively, which is just, the whole point of humanism and the reason why they're so fascinated with the classical text. Now, remember the classical text, Greek, Roman, and biblical, which remember biblical is basically Greek and Roman, but that kind of gets all of this stuff together. And when you're looking at these texts, well, what can I learn from all of these ancient texts that are like more than 1,000 years old? Well, the thing is that while the world changes, the part of the foundation of humanism is that people don't change. The world that we live in might change, but people don't change. And who are the best people? The Greeks and the Romans. So if we want to learn about ourselves, then let's see what the Greeks and the Romans had to say, because they are the best people who have ever lived. And so as far as that goes, let's see what else that we've got here. And
Tom, let me add one thing real quick.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I think it's important to understand, especially if you find yourself writing about the Renaissance and humanism, is that the humanists found themselves in kind of a tough spot, because they were on one side idolizing Greek and Roman writers, but on the other hand, they were devout Catholics, and they had to grapple with the fact that they were idolizing people who were, by the definition of the Catholic Church, pagans. They didn't believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ because, well, he hadn't been born yet. So they didn't have the ability. So they kind of rationalized this through and justified their use of these texts by saying that they were good people who, had they lived after Jesus, would have been good Catholics. But because they lived before him, you can't hold that against them. They can't control when they were born and died. So, let them be as they're going to be, and let them, say their points.
All right. And I tell you what, my friend Michael Pappas, who is asking me on Instagram, he found me on Instagram also at Tom Ritchie. Gosh, AP European Trash going and posts and stuff. All right. So thank you, AP European Trash, for promoting the Hangout. And so Michael wants to know about the 30 Years' War. Can you explain who fought in the 30 Years' War and why? Now, of course, the thing about the 30 Years' War, and I've got a video on this, all right, and it's one of my most popular videos ever. You should watch it. Make sure you watch the ad before that, because that way, gosh, after Adpocalypse, Paul, I don't know how much, if we even make a penny off somebody watching an ad, but it's just like, gosh, the YouTube revenue has just been like,
yep.
Yeah, so make sure you watch as many ads as you can, because we need all the help we can get this week. All right, so as far as that 30 seconds or half the ad, then you can stop, okay? Then we have that corporate money coming at us. And so as far as that goes, can I explain who fought in the 30 Years' War and why? Well, the 30 Years' War begins, and what I talk about, and I'm not going to go into that whole lecture because it's there, it starts as a local and religious conflict, and it in the Holy Roman Empire. And it escalates into a European, like a continental political conflict. So, and this is really a big turning point. 1648 is one of the 3 years that is selected by the exam makers as 1648, 1815, 1914. They have judged those to be the 3 most significant turning points in European history. And so the thing is, 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia. Now, a lot of people say Westphalia. I don't like to use the word fail, even as part of another word. So I'm just going to call it Westphalia, and that makes me feel better. It's a written test, right, people? And so as far as that, this represents the end of religious warfare. Europe is never again going to have a continental full-scale religious war after that. Now, you remember the Spanish Armada and some things going on with some other stuff there. But after that, aside from people in Yugoslavia killing each other, it's not going to turn into this big continental war over different sects of Christianity. And part of that is because of how the war evolved. It's of course, you got the defenestration of Prague. Nobody ever forgets what a defenestration is. If only that were the question, it's just what is defenestration? And everybody passes. But as far as that goes, you see this local religious conflict, and then Gustavus Adolphus, the king of Sweden, gets involved. And he would be, I would say, Gustavus Adolphus and Cardinal Richelieu are your two people that you might end up mentioning on an exam or something like that. But Gustavus Adolphus from Sweden, is a Lutheran, because Lutherans are dominant in Scandinavia, and he swoops in the 3rd phase, the Swedish phase. Now, the French Bourbons, they are seeing, the Habsburgs are on one side. So even though Cardinal Richelieu is Catholic, he is a politique, or as one of my students said one time, politicue. Again, it's a written test. So, I mean, even if you slaughter the French language on a regular basis like I do, no harm done. And so Gustavus Adolphus comes in, the French, Cardinal Richelieu's like, look, I know I've got a nice little red hat. I'm a cardinal in the Catholic Church, but you know what? Our strategic interests are more aligned with Gustavus Adolphus because he is fighting the Habsburgs. And so the French, and then finally, now remember I say, Swedish swords, French funds for the Swedish phase. And then after that, Gustavus Adolphus dies, and Sweden is not as active in combat, but they start financing France. In the fourth phase of the 30 Years' War, which is the most bloody, France is getting involved. This is the French phase. France gets involved full scale on the side of the Protestants. And it's like, wait, we're trying to have a religious war here. And France is like, we don't care. And so then France goes in, and then when they make the peace at Westphalia, what happens here is that the Habsburgs lose power. The Holy Roman Emperor, whatever power was left, gone pretty much a figurehead. That's why Voltaire said the Holy Roman Empire is neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. And then, of course, the Netherlands are then freed permanently from Habsburg rule. They had been fighting their 80 Years' War for independence. So finally that situation's done with. The Swiss become independent, and so the French are basically, while you wouldn't say there's like a winner and a loser or something, but the French are set up to become the preeminent power in Europe, whereas the Habsburgs are never again in the same kind of position of dominance in Europe because of that. And so really what we start to see after 1648 is that wars are for reasons of national interest. Of course, that's the same time you start to see the rise of nation states and stuff like that. Okay, so, and thank you very much, Alex and Jay Chung, 27, George Hahn, 27, lots of 27s here, Molly and enters 0826. Okay, so lots of people following on Instagram. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so as far as that goes, let's see what our next question here. Paul, are you seeing anything that you'd like to answer coming up?
I'm seeing a lot of retweets. Sorry. I think there's been a couple questions about Enlightenment philosophers.
Okay, and if we've got those, like we were doing like a Renaissance and Reformation focus, but if that's where the market's leading, let's go ahead and let's go where the invisible hand leads us.
All right. Hey, seems rational to me.
Yeah. All right. So
well,
go right ahead.
Yeah, so the Enlightenment is all about sort of an extension of the development of scientific thought. You have the Renaissance with its humanism. Rational thought is then sort of applied during the Northern Renaissance to biblical texts, and people start looking for more knowledge. The scientific revolution comes along and seeks to use observation in order to try and formulate theories about the movement of the universe and the stars and the planets and all of that. And so, everything kind of goes from there. When the Enlightenment comes around, these Enlightenment philosophers kind of take this Newtonian view of the universe. So Isaac Newton's idea was that everything worked mathematically, predictably, all this stuff. He sort of thought of God not as an interventionary, I don't even know if that's a word. He didn't intervene in the affairs of man, not like old school, like Old Testament God, or not like the original Ghostbusters, but like this is the time that this is a God who created the universe. He set it in place, set it in motion, and then kind of stepped back because it was so perfect and he's so perfect that it worked perfectly, which perfectly makes sense. So the Enlightenment philosophers come along and they say, well, if there's got to be this order to the way the physical universe works, there also has to be an order to the way that the human-centered universe works, the social universe, you might say, or the political universe. And so what they started to do is they started to analyze the society around them critically and ask questions like, why are there these rulers who are claiming divine right? Why don't people have rights over their own actions? Who do people's rights even come from? Do they come from the ruler? Do they come from God? If government's going to going to be responsive to people and sort of the needs of people, well, then shouldn't it be a little bit more representative? Shouldn't power be divided into different branches of government? Shouldn't in Rousseau's view, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's view, shouldn't the general will kind of rule what government does, not the whim of some ruler? And so these ideas kind of all coalesce into this large body of sort of new classical liberal thought, I think is the best way to put it. And a lot of that is, if you think about our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, those things are very Enlightenment ideas. Thomas Jefferson considered himself an Enlightenment thinker as well. And so these ideas, you have the ideas of Mary Wollstonecraft, who's like pushing for the equality of women, oh gosh, you've got a whole bunch of different people. But kind of the crowning achievement, I think, of the Enlightenment is Denis Diderot's, or Denis Diderot. Yeah, I'm just as bad at French as you are, Tom, I think.
Dennis. I just call him Dennis.
Dennis, yeah, all right. So he pulls together and like all these philosophers and publishes this encyclopedia, which seeks to like put all knowledge into one place. And this sort of creates a lot of social discussion, but also a lot of conflict with the powers that be. Not only, the rulers. It's ironic that most of the Enlightenment rulers or Enlightenment thinkers come out of France, which is like so anti-Enlightenment, is just ridiculous. But also the Catholic Church fights against all these ideas because they challenge the authority of the church as the source of knowledge and are seeking to replace it with science and rational thought. And that's what it's kind of all based on. We can reason this stuff out. Boy, that was all over the place. Tom, anything?
Hey, that's what we're doing here. Okay. I mean, this is basically like, half our audience probably like, hey, you just realized I got an exam this week. That class has been taken all year. They weren't lying. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're bored, buy my app. Okay. Romulus, European History, otherwise known in the App Store as Romulus Euro. Remember, it is in the Google Play Store, and it is also, there's a free version as well if you want to try it out. Romulus Euro, ladies and gentlemen. And let me get to Megan's question. Megan McGold, that's quite a name there. If that's like your real last name, pretty jealous. And Megan, who's got her like bio is I love AP Euro. Which is great. Got a map of Europe following me, all that kind of stuff. Let's do a follow back on that one. I mean, this is like the ultimate Euro student. Like her teacher just got like a free passing score the moment she just walked in the room. Can I talk about the Counter-Reformation and Northern Humanism? All right. So first of all, the Counter-Reformation. I've got a video on that, ladies and gentlemen. You should watch it. Megan McGold, you better watch my video. Watch the ad. All right. And so as far as that goes, the Counter-Reformation, there are two things about the Counter-Reformation. And some people call it the Catholic Reformation because when we hear counter, we just hear against. Okay. So that's an element of the Counter-Reformation, is that it is against the Reformation. Okay. You think about the Jesuits and the spiritual warfare that they are, they're promoting education and they're just trying to, lay the intellectual smackdown on Protestants. So you do have the whole thing like against the Reformation, spiritual warfare and all of that. But the other side of this is the internal reformation of the Catholic Church. And the way I describe this in the video, which you all should watch, is the affirmation of Catholic doctrine. So basically, if anybody disagrees with our doctrines, the doctrines are not the problem. If anybody disagrees, let them be anathema. All right. Let them burn in hell because they're a bunch of no good heretics. All right. But the Catholic Church realizes, we've been off our game. We haven't really been offering a quality product. You start to see seminaries, all right, seminaries, which, are educating Catholic priests. Today, if somebody says they're a Catholic priest, you know that they are celibate, unless, they went through like they used to be an Anglican or something like that, that they're celibate and that they're very educated. When somebody says I'm a Catholic priest, then, they're basically saying I've got a master's degree. And so as far as that goes, which Miss Biondolillo's class, your teacher just got a master's degree, I believe. So, the thing is just not a priest, though, because the Catholic Church doesn't ordain women. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, Catholic priest has a has a master's degree, and that is because of the Counter-Reformation. Remember, one of the problems before the Reformation was uneducated priest, and so uneducated priest. That's something that's like, imagine Thomas More and Erasmus just sitting on the back row and just like face palming, like, this guy can't even read Latin. How am I supposed to get spiritual advice from somebody who can't even read Latin? And then, so basically the other part of that, St. Teresa of Avila, which you might remember from the sculpture by Bernini, where, she is basically, demonstrating how, the Catholic Church is promoting spirituality. Because it's just like Paul said, like Martin Luther said, hey, you can come over to the Lutherans and you don't need an intermediary. You can have a direct relationship with God. Okay, which if you look at the ecstasy of Saint Teresa, the Bernini sculpture. Okay, so as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, by my app, let's see. So Bernini, ecstasy of Saint Teresa. Okay, so let's just take a quick look here. And so the thing is, Luther says that I can have a direct relationship with God if I become Protestant. Does he? All right, now this is a very, very direct relationship with God. And I'm just going to stop there. Okay, so Catholic spirituality, ladies and gentlemen, can be intense. That there is something, keep in mind, when you look at the Baroque, this is a Baroque sculpture, you see the beauty of the Catholic Church as well. Like when you go in a Protestant church, there's nothing there. It's just like white walls and maybe a cross if you're lucky. And so the Catholic Church, gives you that sensual experience in the worship service. So, they really try to step up their game, even though they affirm their doctrines. There is no retreating from their doctrines. And Northern humanism, I've got a video contrasting Italian humanism, which is more individualistic and secular, and then Northern humanism, which is more socially oriented and more of a Christian orientation. So remember that. Now, of course, as Paul noted, the Italian Renaissance has a religious element as well. If you look at any of the art, you see a lot of religious art, but the Northern Renaissance is definitely more socially oriented, more Christian focused, whereas by comparison, the Italian Renaissance more individualistic and more more secular. And as far as Northern Renaissance people, you're thinking about Erasmus and Thomas More. While we're on those topics, Paul, anything to add to that?
You know what? I think you did a nice job with that. The interesting thing about the Northern humanists is, and the almost like, I don't know, unfortunate thing about the Renaissance humanists in the North is that they were very, very devout Catholics. I mean, Thomas More was put to death because he defended Catholicism against his boss, Henry VIII, who was trying to break away, because of this nice little Anne Boleyn woman, and he wouldn't go. Like he said, we can't break away from the one true church. But he's one of these seeds of the Reformation. And the other, Erasmus, was an exceedingly devout Catholic who was trying to better improve the Catholic religion by creating a better translation of the New Testament based on his knowledge of Greek, but ended up calling into question the authority of the Catholic Church. I mean, you think about it this way. If Tom and I are sitting here and we're telling you, this is how things are on the exam, or this is how things are on the, in history, you're gonna tend to believe us until somebody else comes along and says, hey, you got one little detail wrong, and it doesn't make, your big picture we still like, but you got this one detail wrong. Well, that one detail, now you're going to force Tom and I into a situation where we either have to admit publicly that we made one little mistake, or we have to say, no, you don't know what you're talking about, and you're kind of like going against the flow. And if we do that, then yet we have to stand by every single thing that we say 100%, which is what the Catholic Church found themselves in the position of doing. So guys like Erasmus and More, while trying to improve the lot of their church, actually sow the seeds for the destruction and dissolution of Catholic unity in Europe. And that's the unfortunate side. I mean, the worst part of it is that Erasmus, who really, he was desperate to get into heaven. He loved the Catholic Church. He was excommunicated. And so he died excommunicated from the church. Did that mean he got into heaven? I don't know. We'll wait till I get there. I'll find out.
Now, yeah, you relay the message to me in hell. You know, yeah, man, lucky Paul, he must have found out he was like predestined. He seems very confident, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And so as far
I
as
act like it. That's why.
What's that?
I said I act like I'm predestined. And
there you go. There you go. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, just want to remind folks of some stuff here. Now, if you don't want to miss a beat, now I'm going to be broadcasting Thursday night, but I may have an impromptu broadcast or something like that. TomRitchie.net/Euro. You can sign up for my AP Euro students email list. Make sure you are getting notifications from me. So if I decide to broadcast, I may send out an email. I forgot to let people know about tonight because I've just been really, really busy today. But if I decide to do an impromptu broadcast sometime, I'll let people know. I might send some materials out, app codes, something like that. Remember, multiple choice strategy session tomorrow. That's a $10 buy-in. It's going to be worth it. A lot of people tell me that that is like the most helpful thing that I do all week because I work with a small group of people that's limited to 50 people who will all be able to talk to me like through a microphone. And so this is a very this isn't 1,000 or 1,500 people packed in here. This is a small session. Okay. So make sure that you're thinking about that. All right. Now, those of you who are asking we're really wanting to focus on pre-1648 and especially pre-1815. Now, tonight we won't go past 1815, but we will, on Thursday night, Friday morning, we will do some of that. Okay, we'll do the more recent stuff, but I'm wanting to focus on earlier stuff for this. Okay, so let's see if we've got some recent stuff coming in here. So as far as that goes, okay, guilds. Okay, so Nikki, I've been asking all kinds of stuff here. The guilds, basically, as far as that goes, now Madison, I would say that the 100 Years' War probably not going to be on the exam because it takes place, strictly speaking, before this starts. And so as far as that goes, and gosh, that's really funny. All right. Yeah, let's see. Brittany, funny shirt there. But as far as guilds, okay, guilds were organizations of craftsmen in the Middle Ages. Okay, so in the Middle Ages, the guilds would they would decide, are you qualified to be a blacksmith or a cloth merchant or somebody like that? Or a stonemason. So first of all, are you as an individual qualified? And we'll make you a master. If you're qualified, a journeyman if you can work, a master if you're qualified to teach someone else. What about the quality? The number of hours you can work, the prices you can charge. Now, the guild system was it was focused on not competition, but cooperation within a certain group of people. So, whether it's quality standards, how much you can work, how much you can charge, who's qualified, who can get into the guild. They'll make sure there aren't too many producers. So they'll say, we've only got so many spots, and they regulate that. Now, of course, what comes along there is the free market, okay, the marketplace. And so really what you start to see during the Enlightenment and the early 19th century with the rise of classical liberalism is they start to go after the guilds. In Britain, the Combination Acts outlawed any kind of guilds or labor organizations, unions and stuff. The Chapelier law in France. This is something during the French Revolution that they tried to ban any kind of worker combinations. So, you've got the high tide of liberalism. And then in the late 19th century, you start to see the organization of labor unions. And of course, they were marginalized, just like in U.S. history in the late 19th century. But after World War I, which this is something that's kind of telling. So remember, guilds are early. Unions are more recent, but basically World War I is kind of divider because before World War I, you have basically in Britain, the conservatives and the liberals. And then there's the Labor Party, which was kind of the marginal third party. And the liberals and the conservatives actually, in some cases, united together, formed coalitions so that they could stop the Labor Party from being a force in politics. But after World War I, the Liberal Party really is kind of dies, which in some ways you could kind of blame the liberals themselves, because they largely abandoned economic liberalism, and the conservatives sort of picked up that baton that was dropped. And then the Labor Party. So ever since like World War I, you see that the primary parties are the Conservatives and the Labor Party, and the Liberal Party, which now merged with another party, is now the Liberal Democratic Party, has really struggled to remain relevant. So, that's something where you see labor unions have gone, mainstream, and that sort of thing. And so as far as that,
Tom, I got to say now, that was a great example of synthesis right there.
Oh, hey, I'll tell you, because basically, yeah, Paul's showing here that like you're basically taking the argument a long way and going into like showing a knowledge of labor history as a whole. Now, Paul, my friend Timothy Daniels, okay, fellow South Carolinian here, okay. Timothy's asking, hey, a key concept says Rousseau questioned exclusive reliance on reason and emphasized emotions. How the heck is this true? Now, I think what Timothy's getting at is like, isn't Rousseau a man of the Enlightenment? Why is he talking about emotions, Paul?
Well, Rousseau is sort of this bridge between the Enlightenment and the Romantic period, and he's sort of a funny character. His idea, though, is that pure rationality, when we look at this side of Rousseau, pure rational thought doesn't go far enough, and in that it can be cold, it can be calculating, it can ignore certain realities, and emotions are a driving force that we can't ignore. And that kind of foreshadows this Romantic period, which is going to emphasize the power of emotion. It's going to emphasize the power of experience, and it's going to kind of bring back some of the Baroque ideas that had kind of been, I don't know, Baroquened by the Enlightenment, I guess you might say, and bring them like into sway again and make them popular again, and drive some of these nationalist liberal movements of like the 1820s, 1830, 1848, which are going to thrive on emotion as sort of the cause of them. I don't know how far I can take this synthesis argument here up until today, and that's the world that we live in, therefore. How about that?
All right.
Synthesis.
Yeah, so and I think that's a good thing to note here, that we try to, like, when we say Enlightenment, it's like we try to, I mean, historians, you try to say, okay, this is what's going on here, but it's just like if somebody says they're a Republican or they're a Democrat, it's not all the same. So Rousseau, yeah, I mean, it's like he's got some elements of the Enlightenment, but I mean, it's still some elements like some romantics borrow from him. And of course, when you look at Rousseau's writings and how they influenced the French Revolution, that's certainly not what Voltaire had in mind. If you think about a dictatorship of the people and a submission to the general will, that really goes against like versions of freedom that you see from Locke and from Voltaire. And so, the Enlightenment really is based on, a lot of Enlightenment philosophy is based on classical liberalism, where we focus on the freedom of the individual, their political freedom, their economic freedom. And so as far as that goes, Rousseau is not a liberal. Rousseau is really kind of like a proto-socialist, a radical Democrat, however you want to say it. And so, let me give a quick shout out to Mr. Baker's class at Blacksburg. If any of them are watching, I just got an email from that guy looking forward to playing tennis with him in another month. And, Miss Salinas is talking to me on, on DM. And, now I don't know if I would shout out to Miss Salinas' class or Miss Salinas's class, but anyway, y'all know who you are over there in Texas. And she wanted me to know, can I share the hardest topic, event, or period? I personally think that the French Revolution is really like the most complicated development that we look at in AP Euro, which is like why, you look at a lot of other periods and it's like you've got a test dedicated to like, okay, here's the age of Metternich and nationalism and liberalism and the revolutions of 1848. But then the French Revolution, Napoleon kind of gets its own like it gets its own unit. You know, as far as that, I find that is the most you know, the most complex development and the hardest for students to really kind of put together and understand. Paul, what are your thoughts on that one, as far as what you would say is the most challenging thing to make sure that students are understanding?
Well, I mean, I agree with what you say with the French Revolution. I think part of the problem with understanding the French Revolution is that we, as social studies history teachers, like, have been taught to analyze the French Revolution and every event that happens in quick succession. And so we tend to make more of it than we do other topics. I think that students find the most confusing time to be like the late Cold War. And that's generally because if we get to it in my class, it's sort of a one day, oh yeah, here's 95 things that happened after 1960 or 1945 or wherever it is that year that we happen to kind of say, oh no, we need to start reviewing. So it's the modern stuff that I think a lot of people are confused with. And this might just be me, and it might be a national trend, I don't know, but because I think a lot of teachers tend to run out of time at the end, so smash it together and just pray that nothing major comes up, you know, 2 LEQs on the late Cold War or something like that. Please, College Board, I hope you're not watching.
Yeah. All right. And let's see. So as far as that goes, let me see. I tell you what, there are a lot of people asking on Twitter. Now, if I follow you back, like, which means if I follow you back, we've had like a positive interaction at some point before this week. The benefit of like me following you back is like, you know, that like you send me a DM with your question. Okay. And then there are people like on the next level. Okay. There's my friend John Coleman Ward from Chapin High School. The guy hired me. Okay. So the thing is, like, you know, I'm trying to get some questions on Twitter, but if I follow you back, DM me. John Coleman Ward, he just sent me a text. You know, it's like, I mean, he hired me to do a live session for the students in Columbia, South Carolina a few weeks ago. So I'm going to get to John Coleman Ward's question now. Any of you hire me and bring me out to your school, you know, I do APUSH as well. You know, I'll answer your question. You can just text it to me. All right. So my friend JC wants to know, like, Mills, Locke, Malthus, and Smith, different theories on liberalism. Because here's the thing, like, you know, liberalism, this is one of the, and this is another thing, speaking of Miss Salinas, you know, is asking me these questions, that one of the biggest things is you have to unlearn what you think of as liberalism in America, because liberalism in the United States has really gotten where it's more of a pejorative term than anything. Like, few people, like when you look at how many people identify as a liberal, it's like, you know, less than people identify as conservative or moderate. You hear the word progressive a lot now. I hear my friend Henry Smith is watching. Glad you're watching. And Henry, I fixed that that typo on the multiple choice strategy session. So thanks, my friend. But the thing is that liberalism in a European context, you've got economic liberalism, which is the invisible hand, okay, which is classical economics. The government should intervene as little as possible in the economy. Now, you have social liberalism that is much more about people being able to speak freely and, you know, the freedom of religion, your civil liberties, that's social liberalism. And of course, equality for people in society. And then economic liberalism is really about that laissez-faire, or in modern parlance, you know, the as close to laissez-faire as we can get, okay, which, you know, I am in a European context an economic liberal, but I do realize that there is some role for the government, especially when it comes to, you know, some infrastructure, safety net, stuff like that. But if you have a liberal orientation, think about that. Now, John Locke is really a lot of times kind of the godfather of classical liberalism, because John Locke said the purpose of government is to protect natural rights, is to protect life, liberty, and property, which of course Jefferson brings out, you know, the pursuit of happiness, which is inclusive of property. So basically, government, the purpose of the social contract. Now, John Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau all address the social contract, which is how do people get together and form a government, okay? Remember, the divine right of kings is top down. The social contract is about a bottom-up approach. So how is it that we form governments? And so Hobbes, of course, said we form a government because without government, the people's lives are, you know, nasty, brutish, and short, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. He writes in Leviathan. And so without a strong absolutist government, we don't kill each other. All right. And so as far as that goes, you've got that. Now, Locke says, we don't necessarily need an absolutist government. We can have a representative government, and it can be fine, because the point of government is to protect individual life, liberty, and property. Now, of course, for Rousseau, the point of government is to reflect the decisions of the general will. That government, and that's where we get into democracy. Okay, basically Rousseau, being a radical Democrat, saying that, look, we need to have this democracy. Now, Thomas Malthus was a classical liberal, and really, as far as that goes, like Thomas Malthus, when he said, look, the food supply is growing arithmetically, plus signs. The population is growing geometrically, multiplication signs, X's. And so eventually we're going to run out of food. And so people like David Ricardo, and of course Malthus is arguing this as well. Malthus was a preacher. Malthus, which Adam Smith was a moral philosopher. The whole point of the invisible hand is that we all are better off, with that, when we don't try to manage everything with mercantilism, people know what's best for themselves. And so Malthus says, hey, we got to watch out. The government can't get involved in stuff, because if the government starts creating like social welfare programs, then the poor people are just going to have more kids, and then we're all going to die. And so that's the thing. Like when you look at Malthusian economics, it's based on classical liberal assumptions that we don't want. We don't want government intervention on behalf of the poor, because it's going to mess things up. And when you look at the iron law of wages, which is often associated with David Ricardo, this is saying that wages trend towards subsistence. So trying to raise wages beyond subsistence, that's just silly stuff. All right. And liberal, even though Mill kind of evolved. Like there are three things that Mill is primarily focused on. Liberalism, the freedom of the individual. Now, of course, Mill, when he writes on liberty, he's going into, basically the whole doctrine that the government can act in cases when it is to protect the community, okay? That the individual has the right to do whatever they want as long as they're not harming the community. Like there are some people in the United States that are libertarians that are like, oh, how dare the local government say we're going to have a smoking ban and, in public places. Well, Mill would say that, look, the individual doesn't have a right to go into a public restaurant and engage in a behavior that can kill people. Okay, that is in line with liberal thought, because the individual has a right to act as long as they are not harming society. So that's where, Mill's liberalism is really like balancing the needs of the individual with the needs of society. And you can kind of see the evolution of liberalism. And of course, there are various varieties today of liberalism, which including like, social liberalism, being basically like liberalism without like the straight up like laissez-faire, economic liberalism mentality. So more focusing on the social aspects. So John Coleman Ward, JC, thank you, and all of you at Chapin High School who did the live session 3 weeks ago. That was really an honor to be able to, to speak in front of a group of students that wanted me to come down and talk to them in person. So thank you so much for that. Paul, any other thoughts on any of the liberal philosophers?
I think you did a really good job with those, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think if you think of it at least in your head, and if you use the term classical liberalism, that just might help differentiate between modern liberalism, and you can just sort of keep them separate, because they are very different things, And I think this is a trend that we can say about most of European history, is that for the most part, yesterday's liberals are today's conservatives, and that sort of is the progress and the problem perhaps with those two terms.
All right, and let's go back to Twitter, ladies and gentlemen. Now, another thing is that Romulus is tweeting some questions out. Now, also, we might actually as well, we might have some stuff going on as far as we've got a question put out. We might even be putting out some promo codes for the Romulus Euro app. Okay. So Paul, I've got a question about More's Utopia from Emily. Would you like to maybe just get into like the writings of More and Erasmus?
Okay, sure. More's writings are absolutely perfect. I mean, Utopia is the perfect example of a perfect book about a perfect society. I mean, this is just perfection itself. But Utopia really is this critique of the society that he lived in, the society of the late Renaissance, and its values and its political structure. But it's framed not in a critical way. It's framed by kind of showing the anti-example, a society that works without any conflict, in which material goods are owned communally, in which things that are valued, gold, for example, which is valued in European society, has been devalued by using gold as the shackles that they put on, or to make the shackles that they put on prisoners. And through all of this, they've created a society which works together for the greater good of all. So that's where Utopia comes in, and it gives rise to this idea of a rational approach to solving kind of the problems of society. Still with More, though, being inside of a very Catholic universe. And in other words, it's not a challenge to the church, it's a challenge to social norms and the values of greed, and in his eyes, maybe a reflection of a truer Catholic and Christian world. Erasmus is most famous for his writing In Praise of Folly, which Erasmus is sort of an interesting guy in so many ways, but he is an excellent satirist. Like, he loves to make fun of absolutely everything, and he doesn't hide it really, it's obviously intentional he doesn't hide it, but More tried to sort of conceal the argument in this story, which is a counter argument. And Erasmus, no, he just comes out and just like hammers at everything in society. And In Praise of Folly goes out and it hammers at absolutely everything, and it criticizes wrongs. But where this is different from what will later become the Enlightenment is that there's no attempt to try and provide a solution. The Enlightenment is a lot about finding the errors of society. The errors, not sort of like the up and the errors of society. For that you just look up. But sort of finding the errors of society and then finding ways to solve them and reasons why they might exist and all of that. And Erasmus is simply just criticizing things that he sees around him with no solutions whatsoever. And so their writings, again, as I think we said earlier, they provide this intellectual basis for a challenge to the Catholic Church and to societal norms in a larger sense. But it's really the Protestant reformers that kind of grab onto these things and say, hey, a lot of what you're saying here is very right, and maybe the problem with it is the guiding force of all of our morality, this Catholic Church down here. And that leads directly into the Protestant Reformation.
All right, and what's important, what I always emphasize about Erasmus is, while the church didn't really like Erasmus that much, Erasmus never criticized the church's doctrines. And so that's when you think about the Counter-Reformation, it's really, in a lot of ways, you could think of it as a response to Luther, but it's really in some ways too a response to Erasmus, a response to people within the Catholic Church who were just really frustrated that, like, look, and Erasmus is using humanism, and he says that I am reading in the scriptures and stuff, I'm reading the Gospels, the apostles were poor. And I look around and the successors of the apostles, the bishops, they're rich. And so as far as that goes, now, as far as that, let's see, we've got some more questions here. You know, with people asking for post 1815, we're really focusing on earlier stuff. So make sure those of you asking about that stuff. Christina asked about David Lloyd George on Instagram. Oh my goodness, Christina, are you one of Miss Marino's students? Oh my goodness. Love Miss Marino. And so almost got to meet her in Miami. I guess I'm just going to have to go back to Miami. So thank you so much. Okay, we got one of Miss Marino's students, David Lloyd George. Okay, I'm going to answer this just because you're one of Miss Marino's students. Okay, David Lloyd George, as I was talking about kind of the demise of the Liberal Party as the second party in, you know, one of the two top parties in the UK. At the turn of the 20th century, David Lloyd George was instrumental in basically abandoning the principles of classical liberalism in terms of like economic liberalism, and he passes the people's budget, which is very transformational. And like, well, you know, some of the liberals are just like, well, you know, if the Liberal Party's not liberal anymore, you know, we'll go over the conservatives and we'll make them liberal. You know, in an economic sense, okay? And so basically, I would say that David Lloyd George, who's also at the Versailles Conference, you know, sitting in the middle, as he said he thought he was sitting in the middle of Jesus Christ and Napoleon, you know, Clemenceau and Woodrow Wilson. So as far as that is concerned, now I've got a few people. Morgan Howell, one of my favorite people from Quartz Hill. Please say hey to your friends, Morgan. Renaissance art. Now we'll save the Russian Revolution for another time. Charlotte will save NEP for another time. Okay, so we'll anything after 1850 we'll get to later. But Morgan has asked for Renaissance art. Okay, now remember that Renaissance art, the point is to imitate classical styles. All right, that the medieval art was largely religious, also largely flat. The Renaissance art, of course, they've got some new developments such as linear perspective, you know, and that sort of thing that's giving you this 3D element. Now, Renaissance art is always balanced. Okay, everything about it is balanced. It is still like people pose for, you know, it's like you could see that people would pose. Whereas when you look at Baroque art, it is more imbalanced. It is less, you know, is more turbulent, more imbalanced, and all of that stuff. So that's something to keep in mind as far as that goes. Now, remember the bright, vivid colors and classical themes, all right, that you've got, you know, really the, you know, the school of Athens, the birth of Venus, where you see these Greco-Roman, you know, things here, you know, Plato and Aristotle at the center, Venus at the center, my favorite painting, the birth of Venus. Oh my goodness. All right. So as far as that goes, you know, that's what you're looking at. And remember with architecture, the architecture is imitating Greek and Roman themes. And of course, there's the same kind of balance that's focused here. Everything that's on one side is on the other. St. Peter's Basilica is a great example here. St. Peter's Basilica. And that's a great thing to look at there. And remember, everybody, you know, you want to, as soon as possible opportunity, you want to buy Romulus Euro, nice little $2.99 tool to help you out. St. Peter's Basilica. And just to show you just what this looks like here on the outside, you can see here columns, domes. Notice a clock here, a clock here. Everything is completely balanced, and we got a dome in the middle there. We've got all of these columns, of course, Roman writing, all caps. They're screaming at you because the Romans didn't have small letters, lowercase, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so as far as that stuff here, so we've got that, you know, we got that Latin inscription. Gotta love that humanism, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so that's really as far as Renaissance art. And let me see what we've got as far as some other questions. I'm just taking care of a few DMs. Okay, so just talked about Lloyd George. Art will be presented. Candace, your guess is as good as mine. Okay, they just got to know everything. Let's see, the rise of Napoleon. Politically, let's see, okay, political shifts during the French Revolution. Anna, I'm going to save the French Revolution. I mean, Paul, I mean, could you see that? I mean, kind of saving the French Revolution for like the night before, morning of?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's save the French Revolution. You know, as much as I love Anna, one of my favorite people, who buys into my sessions, my paid sessions. That's great. Those are your real friends. The War of the Spanish Succession. Now, Henry, I've got a video on the War of the Spanish Succession. You know, and that is important there. Now, Kate, John Wycliffe, and Jan Hus, I wouldn't see them showing up on the exam. Okay, so as far as that goes, Henry, the War of the Spanish Succession, the last of Louis XIV's wars. I've got a 3-part series on Louis XIV's wars. It's actually one of my newer videos I've made in the past year, and so that one, I think it's one of them that I'm very, very proud of. So I would recommend that you take a look at my series on Louis XIV's wars, and particularly a whole video that's on the War of the Spanish Succession. All right. Yes. Oh, Anna, you understand why that's funny to me. All right. But yes, that is definitely the case. I tell you, she's been great. Really enjoyed getting to know her this year. All right. And so can we explain artistic trends during the Renaissance? Okay. So now what caused art to be such a focal point during the Renaissance? Paul, this might be a good time to talk about like patronage and the role of like commerce in the Renaissance and all of that.
Absolutely. So during the Renaissance, you have this sort of like reinvigoration of trade that's happening. And the trade is being conducted largely by families that are inside of these city-states in the Italian peninsula. We can't really call it Italy, but we do anyway. So I don't know if it's easier, Italy, but if not, Italian peninsula. So there's lots of money coming in from trade. It's a great thing, trade. And it's one thing which is very, very, very important, but which, you know, we don't like talking about as history teachers because, you know, it's trade. It's not all that exciting, you know, and we could talk about, you know, how much the trade in pepper is worth, but, you know, it's just like, no, we got to spice things up a little bit. So we go in and like all of this trade is kind of bringing money into these Italian city-states. And so you have business people, these non-traditional elites who are finding themselves with money, and they're kind of invigorated by the humanist, well, the civic humanist idea of kind of beautifying your city, your people, your society, with the wealth and knowledge that you've gained through your study of the classics. And so these people start, they become patrons of the art. And then what this means is they commission artwork to be done. Now during the Middle Ages, and this is where we kind of have to go back a little bit, the Middle Ages, pretty much, it's hard to say all because then, you know, someone's going to say, oh yeah, you know, but they found like this, you know, piece of paper which was not commissioned by the church. But pretty much during the Middle Ages, like all art was commissioned by the church, which means that they paid for it. It went up in churches for the most part. And so it was driven by what the church found to be important, which was largely the idea of holiness and the idea of sort of a hierarchy of the spiritual world. In other words, in medieval art, people are not portrayed in lifelike proportion to one another or to their surroundings. They're portrayed in sort of the size of the figure equals their prominence in, you know, the universe and in heaven and all of that. So whenever you have like Mary and Jesus in a medieval painting, like they're the biggest people there. And then maybe over in the corner, you know, you'd have some minor saints, and in the late Middle Ages, you'd have even like some early patrons kind of hanging out there looking like very, very small little afterthoughts. But during the Renaissance, these patrons are now going to commission artists to make works of art that will beautify their city. Many of these are still religious pieces of art. They display religious themes and religious stories. A good example of this is Michelangelo's David, this amazingly detailed statue, which is now, you know, and has always been really in Florence. But they also start to push out and incorporate other ideas. The fascination with Greek and Roman writings leads to the commissioning of paintings that display Greek and Roman mythical characters and scenes, as well as biblical scenes. And so really what drives art, when you look at the Renaissance, when you look at the Mannerist movement, when you look at the Baroque movement, and I would venture to say, for a rule of thumb, everything up until maybe the realists or the impressionists of the mid to late 19th century, everything that is created by commission. It's created for the people who are paying for it. And after that, you really have artists that are trying to sell works, and they're trying to make a name for themselves by competing in competitions and things like that. But I'm off topic here. When you go back to the Renaissance, what you have to understand is that what the artwork that you have reflects who pays for it. And so that means that when you have the High Renaissance, the church paying for the painting of the Sistine Chapel, then you get a very religious piece of art. But when you have patrons that are paying for things that are not religious, then you get non-religious pieces of art, like the Birth of Venus that Tom was talking about. I don't know. Between you and me, I'll take the woman, leading the people. I think what they call her liberty. And when she leads the people, like that's at the top of my list right there.
Anna's got my back. Okay, that's all I've got to say. So let's see here. So as far as that goes, great job on that, Paul. Now I have tweeted some promo codes for Romulus Euro, and I will do that again before the end of the Hangout. So watch for those tweets that have promo codes for Romulus Euro. Remember, promo codes can only be used by like one person. Okay, so that's kind of a one-shot sort of thing there. All right, who are these people? Like Slim Shady. And so the SEHS, South Elgin High School, AP Euro kids. Now, South Elgin High School brought me over there for a session there, which, of course, we remember their teacher. And so as far as that goes, very special group of people. Now, another thing, here's the thing, that like the night before and the morning of at those sessions, we have more attendance. And so we want to get to like the Stuarts and the Glorious Revolution, the French Revolution, German unification. Those are the things we're going to save some of those big topics for that. Okay. So as far as that goes, and so then let me just take a quick look here and see what we've got here. Now I already mentioned the Combination Act. So Team Marino, always glad to see you there. All right. Yes. Yes. We've got Reptilis Maximus, part of the Gut Nation. All right. Very good. All right. Or Goot Nation, but it's a written test. Remember, people. The Council of Trent, Brittany, that is the Counter-Reformation. So remember, as far as that kind of stuff, we've got that. As far as the Council of Trent, affirmation to Catholic doctrine, reformation to church practice. One example I like is the Catholic Church will not abolish indulgences. The Pope has the authority to forgive sins. That's Catholic doctrine. It's not changing. It's still that way. But they're no longer going to sell indulgences. Okay, no longer going to sell indulgences. All right, Montserrat, thank you so much. Oh, Rococo art, Cameron, I tell you, got me on something that I like to talk about here, okay? Because Rococo is like basically like late Baroque. And the word that I use for Baroque that applies even more to this, and Paul, I say extra. What's the word you use, Paul?
I say I'm not going to talk about it because Rococo is all pastels and just like foofy, and there's too many little things sitting on shelves. So no, I totally discount it as its entire movement. And I say, let's go on to something else.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think Paul has been triggered, by Rococo. But the thing is, what I think, though, as far as if you look at Rococo, it's like going into like it's basically Baroque on crack or whatever, or on ecstasy. If you think about Saint Teresa, but did I just make a drug joke? Like, okay, no, okay, but that's probably no good, But as far as that goes, don't do drugs, kids. So Saint Teresa just tell you get high on God, and that'll be enough. So Rococo, though, I think that it's important because the excesses of Rococo, just all this stuff here, and it's just like this and that. And it's so extra that the next art phase is neoclassicism, which it's almost like this has just gotten too out of hand. We need some more like of a grand classical style. And so some of you, those of you who went to my live sessions, at all 3 of my live sessions, I did my live lecture on Jacques-Louis David's neoclassicism, and just thank you for the response to that. It's like, I mean, I actually got applause like when I finished that, and it just almost brought a tear to my eye, as far as that goes. But the thing is, neoclassicism kind of grows out of Rococo. It's kind of, I think, a reaction. And of course, you've got the backdrop of the French Revolution and, French republicanism and all of that kind of stuff. So that's important. Okay, now Andrea's got a question, Paul. I think it would be good to, because the scientific revolution has its roots in the Renaissance. Let's go ahead, just, the ways of thinking during the scientific revolution, if we can go ahead and get into that.
All right, sure. So the scientific revolution comes around sort of an outgrowth of humanism, and it's this need to understand sort of the way things work. It's kind of triggered by just an observation that things are not working the way that the church kind of says they're going to work. And initially, it's not a really attack on the church itself. In fact, Copernicus is really hesitant to publish his theories and his findings because he's a little worried about the Catholic Church might take it the wrong way. But eventually, he goes ahead and writes down his observations and his belief that the Earth is at the center. I mean, that the sun is at the center of the universe, not the Earth, although the church has been saying it's the Earth. His intention, and this goes along the lines of More and Erasmus in the Northern Renaissance, is to clarify and to help the church along its way, not to challenge it, because he hasn't really challenged anything that was stated in the Bible. It's an interpretation of the Bible, but he also doesn't publish it while he's alive, and his friends publish it after he dies. So he's kind of safe from the Catholic Church, unless, of course, you're Catholic and believe that, he's just waiting in purgatory, and this one is kind of a knock on his reputation. But the scientific revolution marks the beginning of this long-term shift that you see in European history, where there's a transformation of the search for answers. And in the early part of this course, the Catholic Church and the Bible are sort of the source of answers. They're there to explain the world, to explain why things are the way they are. And the scientific revolution marks the beginning of a shift towards a belief in science, perhaps over a belief in religion, so that you have sort of this challenge to some of the basic interpretations of the Bible early on. And then when you get into the 19th century, late 19th century, you have outright challenges to passages of the Bible. Darwin's theory of human evolution is a direct challenge to the book of Genesis in the Bible. And it intensifies to the point that now we have a very secular and scientifically motivated Europe, which, while there certainly is a religious element to Europe, I think the majority of Europeans, I think this is a safe thing to say, the majority of Europeans will believe scientific explanations for the world around them over religious explanations if they come into conflict with one another.
Okay, so as far as that, yeah. Now one thing Paul hinted at is some synthesis when you go into some of that, because if you think about the scientific revolution and Galileo, it's like Galileo is saying that hey, we're not the center of the universe, and people are like, how dare you, say that we're not the center of the universe? You're making me feel less important, and human beings like to feel important. And so you look at evolution, and it's well, this thing that's in the Bible that says you were all specially created, scientific evidence didn't point in that direction. How dare you tell me that I was not specially created? So the thing is, when you look at scientific developments, it's people tend to resist scientific developments that make them feel less important. Now, if it makes people feel more important, I think people are going to be all over that. So, you know, nobody likes to be told that they're not important. I think that's, you know, just a good kind of overall sort of principle of things. All right. So as far as this goes, now Paul and I are going to be, you know, wrapping it up before long. But let's go ahead and let's see. I got my friend Kevin De Silva. Looks like he might be trying to get one of those Romulus promo codes I just tweeted. Oh gosh, that's so funny. Paul wrote, they just tweeted AP Euro memes. I'm going to retweet this. AP Euro _ memes just tweeted. They made a meme of you, Paul. Rococo, and it says under it triggered. So we've got that. All right. So Trip, we are going to get to we'll mention Romanticism, I'm sure, when we get closer to that. Religious toleration for the Huguenots. You know what? I actually did get a question. You know, Hannah, thanks for the follow. Paul, I got a question about the French Wars of Religion. So let's go ahead and just kind of sum that up, and especially when it comes to the Huguenots and Henry IV and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay, all right. Well, the religious wars, of course, are the series of wars that follow in the wake of the Protestant Reformation, and it really is this clash of, well, religions, but it's also a political clash, and that's what I think is really important to start by understanding, is that none of these things is really 100% a religious war. Everyone has political motivations behind this. And in the case of the French religious wars, you have Huguenots, and Huguenots are French Calvinists, okay? And as I said earlier, whether maybe some of you were here, maybe you weren't, the Calvinist branch of the Protestant Reformation, when it spreads to different countries, it takes on different names. It's changed ever so slightly. So the Huguenots are French Calvinists, but they're also the French nobility who has been losing power to the French monarchy over the course of well, you know, a century or so at this point. And so they're trying to get some power back, and you know, their Huguenot religion is a good excuse for both sides to try and eliminate the other. And so at this, I hate to say great story because it's a massacre, but at the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, you have sort of this beginning of a mass war inside of France between the Huguenots and the Catholics, in which you know, I mean, people are massacred at a wedding. And it leads to this extremely confusing war that you don't need to get into all of the details with, but there's three Henrys. At some point they're running around. There's Medicis involved in this story here. And in the end of all of this, all right, the War of the Three Henrys, the French Wars of Religion, or however you want to put it, we end up with this guy, Henry of Navarre, coming out as the victor. And he's a Huguenot, but he's got a problem. He's, as the victor and as sort of the beginning of the Bourbon dynasty that will stay in France until, well, on and off until sort of the mid-19th century. Hold on, I lost my train of thought. As the beginning of this dynasty, like he realizes that being Protestant, like he's going to continue this Catholic Protestant fight because Protestants are still a minority. And so he does what historians, and in this course especially, refer to as the move of a politique. He puts political concerns over the religious concerns. And realizing he can't rule France as a Protestant, he converts to Catholicism. Now, I'm going to throw converts into quote marks because that's always a tough procedure, you know. But he did famously say that Paris is worth a mass. Now, if you want to read that as like, I'm giving my all for the country, or like, I'm only going to go to one mass and that's, you know, enough to rule the country, you read it as you want. But essentially what he did is he converted to Catholicism to make the peace, but then he also passed the Edict of Nantes, which went in and gave political rights and safety to French Huguenots so that there would be some sort of religious toleration inside of France. So I guess that's about the French Wars of Religion. As far as that's the major stuff that goes on.
All right. So as far as that goes, all right. So we've got time for probably a couple more questions. And those of you, like Anna says that she's going to buy into the multiple choice session. I don't know if that I mean, that was close to sold out when I was looking at that earlier. Let me just take a quick look at that. Yeah, it looks like now, ladies and gentlemen, you know, I will never sell out, but you know, it looks like that session did. So thank you for those of you who bought into that. Appreciate the support. And so let me go ahead and see what we've got as far as some more questions. See if we can answer a few more. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So Linda, let's make sure we talk after this week's over. Okay. I would definitely like to get involved with that. Linda talking about bringing me to Texas. Okay. Would love that. All right. So
you could be the lone star there.
Huh?
You could be the lone star there.
Oh my goodness, Emily made a meme. Paul, there was like this part where you were talking and I didn't switch the camera, so like they're making memes of me texting while you're talking. And oh my goodness, that is okay. So we got that now. Okay, what do I think the essay topics will be? Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's really just so you know, that don't do that. Okay, trying to guess what the essay topics will be is basically like playing Russian roulette. Okay, so you know, I'm loading one chamber and I'm just going to point it at myself and I'm going to fire. And if the essay topic is about what I anticipated, then I'm good. If it's not, then, well, you know what happens. And then what you really need to do is you need to load all 6 chambers. Shoot, get you an AK and load all 30. All right. Get you 30 rounds in that banana clip like some gangster rapper and just point it away from yourself at the exam and go. That's why I tell people, get a hold of that Romulus app. That's going to get trivia. Some people are like, oh, it's just a trivia app. Well, yeah, it's a $2.99 app. It doesn't work miracles, you know, but it does reinforce the content so that you've got that fodder, you know, ready for the SAQs, the DBQ, the LEQ, and, you know, to get that specific information out there. That's the purpose of that app, to help you drill some content. Okay. So as far as that's going on, you know, that's that. But I don't try to game the exam, because especially with these new stimulus-based questions, you know, Paul can verify that, you know, there are topics that won't even be on the exam, you know, like at all. You know, because they're just so selective, and, you know, they don't really have like a comprehensive multiple choice section anymore. You know, so really, I mean, Paul, what's your suggestion as far as just general preparation for kids?
You know, I think that you nailed it. I mean, if there are 55 multiple choice questions, you figure everyone has 4-ish questions attached to every stimulus. I mean, you're taking this thing down to 13, maybe 14 different stimuli that are out there. Now, those stimuli can sort of have questions that stretch out to different time periods, but you're not going to cover the whole class in those. Then you're going to get 1 DBQ, which hopefully is not so specific that you have to know, like, I don't know, just guessing like different types of nationalism and being able to determine between those. And then you're gonna have 2 LEQs, which are kind of like the same thing but different time periods, you know. And so, Tom, I like your analogy of the Russian roulette, but I think more of trying to guess the LEQ would be like sitting in the trenches of World War I with your machine gun loaded, trying to hit the enemy. But this long string of things only has 1 live bullet. And that's the LEQ topic. So you can sit there and you can shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot, but you're going to be shooting blanks most of the time. So you know, you shouldn't try and guess these things. You generally prepare, you read through. If you haven't looked at it, on my website, sargnotes.com, I have, I put like the whole course description from the College Board up there that you can click through and you can read through. And, you know, that maybe will, if you haven't seen it, maybe having something like that will give you an idea of the level of detail they're looking for. Having a general understanding and understanding big topics, big trends, things like that, that's so much more important, because it allows you to have these discussions like we're having. And I encourage you, as you're studying, study with other people and try and do what Tom and I are doing here. Try and take a topic and discuss it, and then try and reach out into another topic and see how it relates. And you'll start to see these connections. I even teach my students to get up on a whiteboard and take concepts that are totally unrelated and try and find some way to connect them using events and other concepts they've learned in the course, and creating this large mind map on the board. Any of these ways of studying will give you the background to be able to write a pretty good essay on something, even if you don't know all that much about it.
All right, Allie, thanks for the snapped meme there. Yeah, these texting memes are just are really making me laugh. Which Allie just sent me that to me on Snap. Remember Tom Richey SC on Snapchat? I'm going to be putting a few things up there. I might even put some Romulus promo codes this week. But that Snapchat's a great, easy way for me to announce when I'm going to be doing stuff, when stuff's going on. I might even open my Snapchat for one of these things. I think, Friday morning, I think I may open my Snapchat. I do that probably about once a month or so. And so Tom Richey SC on Snapchat, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so somebody just made a joke. I don't know if Dean's even watching, but Paul, you'd get this. Like I said, I posted something on Snapchat where we were trying to figure out the relationship between the Emperor Nero and his wife, and trying to go through like how exactly were they related or whatever. And so my friend says maybe it was his 24 years older high school drama teacher, like the new president of France. But all right, so hopefully y'all followed that French election. So lots, and that's the other thing. Like I think that really, as we give some closing advice, like that French election really had a lot of like things that are problems and issues and discussions that have really dominated post-war Europe, as far as, immigration coming from outside Europe, and also internal migrations in Europe as well. The EU and European integration. Also that Europe has become, really moved past having, a manufacturing industrial economy, at the beginning of this course, predominantly agricultural economy. And remember, with women, like Paul said, women did farm work. It's not like the man's like, oh, I'm going to go work in the farm and stay home and cook and clean and watch the kids. Women worked in factories during the Industrial Revolution. A lot of things like that, that you need to really be privy to. And so the thing is, I think that, we're going to cut off this broadcast, but we are going to be back. Now, Paul may be broadcasting some more this week. I may be broadcasting some more this week. Looking forward to seeing y'all, some of you, at tomorrow's multiple choice strategy session. Now, remember, you can bring friends over. If you bought a ticket to that, please bring some friends over, watch it as a group, share the archive with your friends when I put that out. I want as many people to see that as possible. And I'll actually put the archive, if you missed out on it, I'll put the archive for sale at half price, like when that happens. So stay tuned for that. Of course, my email list, tomritchie.net/Euro. Sign up for my email list. I'm going to be sending out some updates and notifications and all of that kind of stuff via email. Make sure Romulus Euro, buy the app, $2.99. What can go wrong? We'll be putting out some more codes as we continue. But Paul and I, now, Paul, did you say you might be joining me on Thursday evening?
I absolutely.
Okay, excellent. So Paul and I are going to be back on Thursday evening doing a broadcast at 8:00 p.m. And of course, that's the night before the exam. And so we're going to focus. Now, we did primarily an early stuff focus. I would say, Paul, Thursday night we'll focus on a lot of like post like 18, 15. But we will save some things for like the morning of the exam, things like the French Revolution, German unification, Reformation, the Stuarts. So there will be a few topics that will likely hold back because, you know, people are going to want to have that primer that morning. So, you know, but I think that we'll focus on largely post 1815 on Thursday night. But then again, what's to stop me from deciding, you know what, I want to do a quick broadcast on Wednesday, just a quick little thing to do something, you know, who knows? So get on the email list, all that kind of stuff. So Paul, any closing words for you before we sign off?
No, well, just one, and that's that, you know, people have a lot of questions as they go along here. And remember that both Tom and I have a whole series of videos. He's done far more than I have, but we both have videos that touch on many of the topics that you're asking questions about. And so if you have the questions and they haven't been answered, then you can look through our YouTube channels and find, in most cases, you can find the answers that you're looking for in there. I've been tweeting out some links to some of my videos as we've been going along, but you know, there's many more out there. So, you know, feel free to go through, watch as much as you'd like. I mean, that's what they're there for. They're free. You know, take advantage of it, and most of all, you know, focus on making the most efficient use of your study time. You know, you guys have been doing this all year. And you have to realize that going into this. You can sit here and sweat the details for the next 4 days as much as you want to, but the little details are not going to make the big difference in your score. What's going to make the big difference in your score is looking at long-term trends, looking at big picture items, and really knowing the story of European history, which I think is different from the stories of European history. So my advice would be just, you know, calm down a little bit, take your studying one step at a time, and understand that you've been doing this all year. And if you've been doing it well all year, there's no reason to believe that you're not going to do it well on Friday.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Paul, for the encouraging words there. And we are going to close off this broadcast. But like I said, we are going to be doing some other stuff on Thursday night, and it's going to be excellent. It's going to be lit. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So y'all don't want to miss it. Tell your friends. Thursday night, 8 o'clock, and then Friday morning at 9 o'clock, I will be broadcasting the annual Breakfast with Richey. Okay, so that's going to be happening. Okay, so let me just make sure. Now the exam is not. Let's see, the exam is on May 12th. Okay, so let me just project this because, you know, if you see it, then it just becomes that much more real, right? Before we lose like everybody. All right, so May 12th, 9 a.m. Eastern. That's going to be Breakfast with Richey. And just closing words, ladies and gentlemen, love that meme. And everybody remember, buy my app. Thank you so much. Of course, that's POV me, but, you know, I mean, I know what I'm talking about, right? All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, been fun tonight. It is always a pleasure.